Crown Royal Bourbon Mash, now called Blender's Mash, versus Crown Royal The Noble Collection 13-year-old Blender's Mash. How do these compare? Which one's better? Stay tuned for the Whiskey Whistle. Hey, my whiskey people, Mark here from Whiskey Whistle on YouTube, sharing a little whiskey awesomeness from Winnipeg, the center of North America, bringing you a 2-up of Crown Royal. Both of these a Blender's Mash, which is essentially the same mash style that they use for bourbon in USA. Now, there was a big problem when Crown Royal brought this out with bourbon mash on the label. They were forced to change it. They couldn't sell it in USA. And so I think that we repatriated, I'm guessing, probably train cars full of the stuff. And it was on sale. I think I paid about $35, something like that for this. Now it's called Blender's Mash. Same bottle, same style, Blender's Mash. 40% ABV. And it doesn't say anything about the mash bill, but we'll talk about that when we get to this one because it should be the same mash bill here. All right, let's get that poured into my Canadian Glencairn glass. That was a massive pour. I'm in the middle of a huge recording night. All right, so that is the bourbon mash. All right, now this is something that is very special, and I want to give a quick shout out to Davin de Kergamot, from whom this came. We had a special event in Winnipeg last year in September, and he brought this and left it behind, I think on purpose. I hope. Thank you so much, but there's just a bit left there. I'm sure he probably has a couple more in his barracks. All right, so the 13-year-old Blender's Mash, let me get that poured and we'll talk about it. Now, Crown Royal, something I want you to know, and this is not the first time I've noticed this, with your Noble Collection bottles, your corks have a lot of play at the top. Now, once you get to here, then it's a good fit. But the very top of your cork is a little bit too narrow for the opening of the bottle. Now, maybe in Texas where it's humid and you got these bottles there, maybe that cork is nice and moist and fills up the space, but it's too loose. And I think you lose a little bit of whiskey over time if you're not careful. What I did was I wrapped that in paraffin parafilm. So I wrapped that around to prevent excess evaporation. All right, let's get that poured. Well, I guess I'll have to pour a nice amount of that too. Beautiful bottles for the Noble Collection, and I wanted to use that for an infinity bottle, and I tried to get rid of this. It's almost impossible. I think you'd have to use steel wool and really go at it. Okay. All right, now what I'd like to read to you first is about the Noble Collection 13-year-old Blender's Mash. Now, let me just read this to you. First of all, the Bourbon Mash, now called Standard Blender's Mash, on no age statement. This is 40% ABV, 80 proof. This one is 45% ABV, 90 proof. That's nice. On the front here, we see Canadian Whiskey 13-year-old Blender's Mash. It's a limited release, and it says hand-selected from our rare stock, carefully aged. 750 milliliters, which is nice. Of course, that's standard in Canada. Okay, so on the back here, this third expression in the Noble Collection is a rare stock of our Canadian whiskey, made with a mash bill of 60% corn, 36% rye, that is high rye, and 4% barley malt. It is one of the 5 unique whiskeys that comprise our signature blends. Carefully aged in new charred American white oak barrels for no less than 13 years, The complexity of this liquid intensifies with the aging process. I won't read the tasting notes. They talk about the color. I'm sure there's color added, but I'd sure like to compare the color of these two. So let me just get those close. And I'll get my little piece of paper. We'll go like that. It seems like they're both Crown Royal color. The 13-year-old might just glow slightly darker than the standard. I think also the ABV affects the color, of course. But anyway, so it's just a hair darker there. Okay, so we're going to start with the bourbon mash. And yeah, it's funny that they got in hot water because of the name bourbon mash. Because I guess for people who aren't aware, it looks like it might be a bourbon. And I suppose if you're shopping at a store and you don't really know much about bourbon, and someone, you're buying bourbon for someone for a gift, that could be misconstrued, and that's why they got forced to change the name to Blender's Mash. So, all right. Anyway, so does this have any legs? Let's have a look. Not bad legs. Actually, pretty slow. Look. I mean, very slow for 40% ABV. Interesting. Oh, and a quick hello to Stephen Wilson. Hi. Hope you're watching this. Okay. Sorry I didn't get the new bottle that says Blender's Mash, but I already had that, so... Anyway. All right, so let's get into the nose for this one. Very wood smoke oriented. I'm sure that is also new oak matured. I don't think it says here at all. Okay, aged in a combination of new charred American oak and ex-bourbon barrels. There we go. Okay, so it does have some new charred oak. And I'm thinking that that's probably number 4. Could be number 5, maybe not though. And I'm also guessing that those ex-bourbon barrels were probably just first fill, maybe second at the most. But very caramelly. That wood smoke. Macintosh apple, toffee, a little bit of pear. Spices, we've got ginger in there. Cinnamon, a little bit of cardamom. I mean, it's kind of like a bourbon, but it's also like Crown Royal. So it's almost like, well, if Crown Royal moved its distillery south 150 kilometers into North Dakota and started to make whiskey there and call it bourbon, which they would then be able to, this is what it would smell like and taste like. There is a Pez candy note I'm getting from this. Okay, onto the palate. Cheers, folks. Candied banana. Cherry jam. Some nice vanilla tones there. The caramel, the toffee. The finish brings you, again, the candy, that Pez candy. A little bit of banana chips. Banana chips. Sweet vanilla. Hint of cinnamon. Cooked apples. Some fresh, bright, tart apples as well. My mouth is very fresh after I swallow this. And that's that high rye that's really adding some complexity here and bringing in that fresh apple, some ginger. Now, when I taste this, the only thing that's lacking here is ABV. This would be, well, I would love that at 45%. It is very good. I'm going to add just a dash of water. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 5. That was 5. That's okay. We put a lot of whiskey in there. Okay. All right, now on to the 13-year-old Blender's Mash. 45% ABV. Let's check the legs out. Here we go. Well, my goodness. Even slower legs than the Bourbon Mash. By any standard, those are very slow legs. Well, beautiful. Surely that's going to have a nice mouthfeel. So let's get into that, okay? On to the nose. Yes, you know I can tell it's the same mash bill. But when you age it for 13 years versus probably 3 to 5 years old, maybe 5 years old with a bit of 3-year-old rye. No. I'm guessing that's about 5 years old. That would be my guess. You get some beautiful timber. Old library volumes. There's a waxy note there. A hint of saddle leather. You know, that really, really kind of like hard to touch leather that you get for saddles and sometimes for belts. When it's this old, you know, for bourbon, this would be so old. You still have some cinnamon there. Pickled ginger. Spices that I don't have names for. And this is what happens when you have something that is super aged. And for bourbon, 13 years is very, very long. That bonfire kind of wood smoky note you're getting here. Barbecued apples. Some kind of a minty herb. There's a salty note in there. I mean, it's just so interesting, so complex, and it would take me a very, very long time to sit here and smell it and pick everything out. It's complex. If this were a bourbon, this would be probably one of the more complex noses I've ever smelled. Something kind of like the Evan Williams 12-year-old and some of the older wild turkeys that I've had in the past. All right, onto the palate. Cheers. Big cheers to Davin. It's like an apple orchard in my mouth, including some of the apple wood that's burning. The finish is just like a bourbon. Very spicy. But in classic Crown Royal style, there is a luscious, smooth sweetness that's woven through this. It's quite sweet. Some almond in there. Toasted almonds. The apple, mint. And the finish now is, Well, it's superbly long, extremely long. Sweet apple mint. Rather than mint, though, it's almost more like basil. Cherry fruit leather from Sunripe. There's some Thompson seedless raisins in there as well, in the finish. It's very fruity. Well, let's add a bit of water there. Now, there is no comparison between these two. But what's interesting is we have the young version versus the older version. What's really fun here for me is that we have the bourbon mash, now called Blender's Mash, at about 5 years old. And then 8 years later, this is what it is. So we can really see a progression from young to old here. All right, now with water, the bourbon mash, not much has changed. It's just really, really lovely and sweet now. Like a coffee cake with apples and cinnamon. And a nice sugar, kind of like a cinnamon crumble on top. Banana cream pudding with a graham cracker crust. Yes! A little bit more cinnamon on the finish. Yeah, that's nice. It's very interesting. And it's only $37. One more taste. It's exceptionally well made. I'll give them that. I would like it at a higher ABV, but for $37, you're getting a lot of whiskey here from this bourbon mash that's now called Blender's Mash. So let's get on to the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for bourbon mash, aka Blender's Mash from Crown Royal, 80 proof, 40% ABV. What's that going to be, folks? It's going to be 81 out of 100. You heard it. 81 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Crown Royal Bourbon Mash. That would probably, it would probably be more like 84 at 45% ABV, which is their standard sort of higher end Crown Royal for Northern Harvest Rye and Crown Royal Black. All right, so let's check out that 13-year-old Blender's Mash now with water. You just get more of the bakery notes, those apricot French pastries, more roasted almonds. The wood smoke is backed off a little bit here. Onto the palate. Waxy, medicinal. There's literally a like cherry cough syrup coming through here when you add water. And that's very interesting. Cherry stones. The almond is really ramping up here, and I think that's what's giving it that sort of like cherry pit, cherry stone kind of a thing going on here. Cherry lozenges, cherry cough syrup. If this were a bourbon, it has everything you want from a 13-year-old high-proof bourbon. Well, the finish is actually, it's interesting. I'm getting a longer finish with the bourbon mash, but with the 13-year-old blender's mash, it is a strong medium finish. It trails off quickly, but what you have there is just lovely. It's sweet and tart and fruity. The cherry note is there, and then it just kind of trails off, but it's just a well put together whiskey, and the finish is absolutely lovely for what it is. But oddly, yeah, longer finish with this one. Well, let's get on to the WhiskyWhistle Whiskey Score for Crown Royal Noble Collection, the 13 years old Blender's Mash. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 89 out of 100. You heard it, 89 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle Whiskey Score for Crown Royal Noble Collection 13-year-old Blender's Mash. Awesome to see an age statement on the label. Awesome to see high proof for the Noble Collection. This is the highest proof so far. And if you watched my channel recently, you saw there was the 10-year-old limited edition recently. Also a very, very lovely whiskey. But boy, if that's what Canada can do for about $100, USA will have to start pulling out all the stops, I think. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the little emblem right here and hit the bell also so you're notified of the future Whiskey Whistles. If you've been enjoying Whiskey Whistle and you've been liking my reviews, why not jump in and support the channel through Patreon? Throw up $1 per video or $3 or $7 to be a cask strength supporter, and you'll get advanced viewing of the Whiskey Whistles, and also you'll get your name in the credits, which are coming up right now. Anyway, take care everybody. We'll see you for the next one. Goodbye now.